Drivers already beginning to drop out of competition. Here is Dick Berggren with Scott Tobias.
Scotty, you're out of the race. What happened? I say, it looks like you're out of the race.
Yeah, we broke the right front hub.
What kind of shape is the racetrack in at this point, Scott?
Oh, it's beautiful. Really nice.
Is there plenty of room to pass right now?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, Scotty's day is over, but he says the racetrack is in great shape for racing.
Second-generation driver Scott Tobias. And there is the interval between first and second. Sammy Swindell and Doug Wolfgang, as these two drivers have been up front since the green flag dropped. Racing on the track involving Jack Haudenschild in car number 7. 20 laps have been completed, and also the number 4 of Danny Smith.
Haudenschild in that bright red-orange number 7 there you see in the middle of the racetrack is trying to work his way around the high side of some slower traffic to keep the distance between himself and the rest of the field. If you've been watching ESPN the last couple of years, you remember seeing Haudenschild go over the fence at the high-banked half-mile dirt track at Odessa, Missouri in the middle of the 1982 summer. Jack's had a couple of rides since then. He has become one of the regulars in the World of Outlaws sprint car trail. Young man out of Ohio who burst on the scene really about 5 or 6 years ago with a couple of friends of his who ran sprint cars locally back home near Worcester, Ohio. He's really become a mainstay in sprint car racing.
Jack Haudenschild hailing from Millersburg, Ohio.
He has never won a World of Outlaws sprint car race. He's had a number of victories on the open competition trail. His best finish in 1983 in a World of Outlaws sanctioned event has been a second place.
The car right behind him is driven by Richard Lupo from Hanover, Pennsylvania. That's the number 2A, but right now, as the interval between first and second begins to close up a bit as the leader has come upon some slower traffic. There you can see Doug Wolfgang, who is right up on the tail of Sammy Swindell now in turn number 3. Both of the cars trying to pass a slower car, and Doug Wolfgang moves to the inside and passes Sammy Swindell. As Swindell got up too high on the racetrack, lost the bite, and Doug Wolfgang was in the right place at the right time to pass, and we have a new leader, Doug Wolfgang, in car number 18, and still Swindell is caught in traffic.
Well, that's one of the things that Swindell did not want to happen for a number of reasons. It's difficult to pass on this racetrack, and he was pretty adamant before this race began in saying that he did not want to lose the lead. He wanted to lead this race for the first 38 laps of the green flag segment. Wolfgang stalked until he had an opportunity in heavy traffic. And look how heavy the traffic is as the two leaders continue to go through the slower cars.
Now Sammy Swindell is getting some pressure from the third place car driven by Keith Kaufman. Kaufman to the inside. Once again, Swindell high on the racetrack. Keith Kaufman gets by him and moves into second place. And Larry, it could be that Swindell is having some handling problems because his car is moving all over the racetrack when he comes off the corners.
Well, it's very possible that the racetrack can change, the car can change. Swindell kind of intimated he wouldn't show everything that he had in his hand in the first 38 laps of this race, but I'm sure he had no plans whatsoever of being relegated to third before we went red at the end of the 38th lap or first segment.
Remember, we will have a pit stop in this race as all the cars will come in at the end of 38 laps, and then we'll go back and race the final 25. The reason for that, the fuel capacity on these sprint cars is somewhere between 33 and 35 gallons. They use about a gallon a lap, so that is the reason why we must stop for the pit stop. Here is Dick Berggren in the pit area.
One of the cars we're looking at here is Keith Kaufman's number 77. That car has by far the most powerful engine in the field under the hood. Specifically, the engine is a Rodak. That's originally built for tractor pulling and drag racing. They put this thing on a dynamometer before they came here, and they registered an incredible 830 horsepower. This in a 1,400-pound car. He's got a lot of muscle under the hood, and Kaufman loves these big racetracks.
And there he is, Keith Kaufman from Mifflintown, Pennsylvania, running in second position right now. Still leading the event is Doug Wolfgang. Third place is Sammy Swindell, and his brother Jeff Swindell is running in fourth. We have completed 27 of the 63 laps that will make up this entire race, 27 of the 38 in the first segment.
Wolfgang continues to lead this race. He is a previous winner here. We're looking close at Keith Kaufman. Kaufman there in that red number 77, racing in the tire tracks of people like Jan Opperman, Bobby Adamson, Billy Casella, all former drivers of the Al Hamilton number 77. And by the way, if you're an Eastern Sprint Car fan, you're familiar with the number 77. You know where it came from? 77 Sunset Strip, one of Al Hamilton's favorite TV shows of all time.
ESPN presenting coverage of the Super National Sprint Car races from the New York State Fairgrounds in Syracuse, New York this afternoon. And the leader at this point is Doug Wolfgang. Keith Kaufman, there is Doug Wolfgang in car number 18. Second right now is the number 77 of Keith Kaufman, and then the number 1 rather, of Sammy Swindell. You know, leader Doug Wolfgang flashes down the straightaway. Pretty good race going on for second position. It involves the Swindell brothers, and we have a crash. Involved in this accident is Sammy Swindell.
You don't see much emotion from Sammy Swindell normally, but you get an idea of how important this race is to these drivers. Sammy Swindell, it has been said about him that 6 words in 5 days, that's about all you get. But you can tell that Swindell was very unhappy with what happened here. A most unusual position to have an altercation between 2 cars, Swindell and Ed Lynch. Ed Lynch, a veteran race driver who has been driving race cars since just about the same time that Sammy Swindell came to life on this earth, somewhere between 20 and 25 years ago. And Swindell looks like he is going to be eliminated from this race. It wasn't a sudden or a hard crash along the front stretch, but enough to knock the cars out.
Well, Dick Berggren is right there on the scene. This accident has occurred right at the start-finish line.
Sammy Swindell's car backed into the inside retaining wall. He hit it with such an impact that it actually broke the rear axle. That's a piece of round steel. It's 3 inches in diameter, almost a quarter of an inch thick. You just almost can't hit hard enough to break a thing like that. Maybe once a year in sprint car racing, you'll see a guy hit as hard as that. Swindell's car is definitely bent, definitely out of the race right now. We'll try to talk to him in a minute.
All right, there was a good battle going on for second position involving Keith Kaufman, Jeff Swindell, and Sammy Swindell. When this accident occurred, those drivers were trying to lap the slower car of Ed Lynch Sr., number 46, when the accident occurred right here on the main straightaway. Now the safety crews begin to clear the wreckage.
Bob, I was certainly taken in by the deception of the lack of speed on a 1-mile racetrack. I had just reported it did not look like that hard of a contact. Certainly looked like it was a hard enough contact to knock Swindell out, but you got to remember that the speeds are up to maybe 150 miles an hour on the straightaways here.
And Dick Berggren now is with Sammy Swindell.
Sammy, what happened?
Well, Ed Lynch there was pushing real bad, and he pushed out, and me and Shane went under him, and he just came back across the racetrack and got under my right rear, and, and he just stayed with me. I couldn't get away from him, and I thought we could have saved the car, but, I was going to spin it and keep going, but, he ran into me again, and I don't know. I don't guess he has any brakes.
Sammy Swindell obviously very disappointed. Pole sitter out of the race for today.
31 laps have been completed now. We only have 7 to go until we get the red flag when the cars will come in for their pit stop. Well, let's check the standings at this point here at the Syracuse Super Nationals. The leader of the race is Doug Wolfgang. Running in second position now is Keith Kaufman.
Day and night, ESPN keeps track of the action down the stretch. Horse Racing Weekly, Wednesday on your total.
Assignment of CFL playoff time starts on Sunday, November 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 Pacific Time live. The Western semifinal, the 13th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 Pacific Time on ESPN. Back to racing as the green flag comes out once again following the altercation down on the main straightaway involving Ed Lynch and Sammy Swindell. So now Keith Kaufman right behind the leader Doug Wolfgang down the backstretch. Jeff Swindell running third, and Rocky Hodges is fourth. Off of turn number 4, about to complete lap number 34, Doug Wolfgang, the leader of this race. He's been only the second leader of the event. Sammy Swindell led the first few laps, and then Doug Wolfgang caught him and passed him in traffic. The other car involved in that accident down on the main straightaway besides Sammy Swindell, Ed Lynch. Here we go to the pit area once again to Dick Berggren.
And I'm with Ed Lynch. Ed, what happened in that accident as you see it?
Well, as we were coming out of 4, Sammy's rear end and my front end got together. Now, I don't know who caused what, but after my front end got hit and knocked the steering out, I tried to steer away from it. I didn't have anything to steer with.
Well, they both said about the same thing. The two cars just got together. One of those unfortunate racing crashes.
Doug Wolfgang has opened up quite an advantage over Keith Kaufman. But remember, these drivers at this point in the race aren't pushing too hard because they know in just a couple of laps they'll be coming in for their stop, refueling their cars, checking them over before setting sail on the final 25 laps of the race.
And everybody will make changes. As a matter of fact, last night, Steve Kinzer and Bobby Davis's crews, Bobby Davis, of course, already knocked out of the event with a crash early on, stayed up all night. They were two of the fastest cars here all week this week as we go back and look at Jack Haudenschild going around the outside of Kramer Williamson. The Davis and Kinzer crews stayed up all night completely rebuilding their cars even the night before the eve of this race.
Doug Wolfgang crosses the start-finish line and is given the one more lap signal before we have the red flag to stop the event. So we are nearing the end of the first 38 laps. Jack Haudenschild flashes down the main straightaway. Jack started the race in 12th position. He now hails from Houston, Texas, driving car number 7. And the red flag has been displayed, and the first 38 laps of the race are over. And Doug Wolfgang was in front when the red came out, so he will start up front when we go back to racing for the final 25 laps.
And if you're a race fan, you gotta like this. I mean, it's unusual. There, by the way, is an Oswego Roadster, one of only 2 that made this race. That's Ed Thompson, who's almost annually in the top 10. Denny Wheeler is also here. But I'll tell you, what happens during the red flag can be exciting.
And Dick Berggren will be roaming the pit area, talking with various drivers to find out what problems they've encountered during the first 38 laps in just a moment. That's how they finished. Doug Wolfgang, Keith Kaufman, Jeff Swindell, and Rocky Hodges. All cars now in the pit area for fuel and other mechanical adjustments. Dick Berggren is roaming the pit area to find out what's going on down there. Dick?
And the first place I'm roaming is with Doug Wolfgang. Doug, you're in. Looks like your crew's very comfortable. Are you happy with the car?
We're a little pushy, but we add a little stagger to it, and I believe we're going to be all right this last part if I can just hang on, stay out of trouble. I don't know if we're real fast on the straightaway, but I'm pretty good in the corner right now. I think Sammy got to pushing before he crashed there, and that's why I got by him. Track got a lot stickier after about 10 laps.
Now that pushing situation, that's a chassis adjustment. Can you change that with the tires that you put on the back of the car here?
Yeah, I added a full inch of stagger, which doesn't seem like much, but on a speedway car they move it in tenths, so we moved it an inch. So I think we can cure it.
So you've made a major adjustment. You think you're going to go faster in the second half then, don't you?
I think I'm going to be all right.
You're going to win it?
Yeah, no doubt.
There's Doug Wolfgang. He's very happy about things. All the cars on pit road right now are in the process of changing tires, particularly rear tires. In fact, all of the front 3 or 4 cars had pockmarks in their tires, had little blisters in them, and they're in the process of changing them, constantly putting new tires on. They're getting ready. Here's the guy that's running second right now, Keith Kaufman. Keith, are you happy with this car?
Yeah, the car's working pretty good. We made a couple more adjustments, and hopefully maybe we can just get a little bit more out of it. But I think we'll be right there.
Now, it looks like you got a ton of horsepower in this thing. Is this car easy to drive today?
Well, they're all easy to drive on the right, and we're pretty close, and I just hope everything keeps going the way it is.
Can you blow Wolfgang off? Can you beat him?
I'm going to try to.
Okay, there's Keith Kaufman getting ready to climb into his car. Here's Carl Kinzer. He's working on the back of Steve Kinzer's car. And Kinzer and Steve Kinzer, they're both adjusting the wing angle. That probably has to do with a chassis adjustment in the car. Try to make it stick a little bit better, get a little bit of resistance away from the race car. We're going to go down now and try to find Jeff Swindell if we can.
Well, Larry, this is an interesting situation because the drivers know what's wrong with their cars. Now they can make the adjustments and go back out and race for another 25 laps.
Yeah, it is, but the problem is that sometimes when you make a change for what you think is the better, it actually has an effect on another part of the race car. So you got to be very careful. As Doug Wolfgang says, sometimes you make those small changes and not the big ones.
And Dick Berggren continues to roam down there. What are you doing now, Dick?
Well, I'm with the fellow who's running